Hello and welcome to the third episode of The Week That Was, a program where you get to sit back and review the highlights of the week. My guest for today is the group editor of Herald and well-known journalist, Mr. Sujay Gupta. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you.
As usual, we have a number of stories which are lined up to discuss this week. The week that was from 28th November to 4th December. We have the first on our list, the brutal assault on Edwin Coelho by PSI Stanley Gomes. Then we have allegations against a particular minister in the present cabinet. The sword of Omicron hanging over Goa tourism. The old Goa protests. And finally, the Archbishop's strong message to the authorities that be. So on 28th of November, we were horrified to see the news in the Herald, the voice of Goa, about the assault which took place at the hands of PSI Stanley Gomes against an innocent youngster, Edwin Coelho. And this was totally unwarranted in a land where criminals and drug peddlers roam free.
Yes, Freddy. Firstly, it's been a very busy news week, and all of us have been on our toes covering it, analyzing it. Starting off with the very beastly assault on an innocent young man by a man in uniform. For our viewers who haven't quite followed the story, the incident happened on the night of 23rd. This family, Edwin Coelho, his cousin Alston Coelho, and one more person went to the police station to basically reconcile a family matter. They wanted to close a family dispute that they were having.
Yes.
And they went with that intention to essentially ask the police to intervene and lodge a report. This boy, Edwin Coelho, who incidentally was supposed to finish his formalities and then immigrate to Canada, he already got a very good offer from a company in Canada, and he was heading off.
Yes.
So Edwin Coelho, all he did was while the talks were going on in the police station, he just came out. His mother was a little worried, so she was pestering him or talking to him or asking him where he was, as all mothers do. So all he did was he came out of the police station, and how young children or young men and women do these days. He wanted to upload a picture of the police station and send it to his mother on Snapchat to tell her, look, Mom, I'm actually at the police station, I'm here, because the mother was also worried because it's a family dispute and what was happening. While he was doing that, and this is again his version, his lawyer's version, while he was doing that, apparently PSI Stanley Gomes emerged from within the police station premises to the outer area where this boy was.
Margam police station.
Exactly, the Margam police station, came out, and according to the boys, he started kind of speaking to him in a very rough manner. He snatched his mobile, told him to delete. He said he was very shocked as to what was happening. And then he apparently kind of held him or led him back into another room inside the police station and started thrashing him mercilessly. So much so that, when he started assaulting him, his ears got ruptured, and we've seen the medical reports and, from hospice, and we know what really happened. The medical report is very clear. I've spoken to doctors. They have said that it's an injury which was very serious then. By God's grace, it's healing now, but it could have been very bad. Okay. The point being that this was an absolutely unprovoked assault. He would have been hit much more if he had not screamed and shouted and the cop, the rogue cop, the alleged rogue cop. Let's put him this because for legal reasons. He knew that his cousins and others were outside, so he didn't take his brutality beyond a point. But what he had done was worse. Of course, there was a big movement. We took it up. Other papers took it up. We took it up as a huge campaign. The lawyer advocate Siola has been very proactive in this. But there was a lot of pressure constantly to get the police to lodge an FIR because the cop was suspended. However, no FIR was lodged. Initially, they said we'll have an inquiry. But if any common man, suppose you and I go and beat somebody up in a police station, nobody's going to wait. They will come and pick us up first, lodge an FIR, start the investigations, put us behind bars, and then do it. Here there was a lot of leeway. And then shockingly, on the day that they actually filed an FIR, they filed a counter FIR against him, which at the end of the day, okay, an FIR can be filed at any point of time, but it needs to be seen why this counter FIR by the police, funnily enough, accusing Edwin Coelho of actually provoking and assaulting the cop, came to light. It seemed very strange, because if that was the case, then these facts should have been brought to light when on the 23rd, 24th itself, because if the complaint was lodged by Edwin Coelho about his assault by the cop on the 24th. The counter complaint was not, there was no counter complaint then.
At that time.
So this whole gap. Secondly, Edwin Coelho has medical reports to prove an assault on him, the police person does not. But anyway, these are matters of investigation which everybody will go into, matter of legality. We are just putting in front of the viewers as things stand now. The facts are that FIR was not lodged immediately, the counter FIR, the counter complaint was also not lodged. Anyway, it's a matter of record. Apparently, Edwin Coelho still hasn't got a copy of that FIR. Anyway, these are matters of detail. What is important is that if the system allows men in uniform to brutally assault people who are not even accused in any case, they are not connected anyway, they are just visitors to the police station, it speaks very, very poorly of the state safety standards. If people are not safe inside a police station, where would they be? And these are matters that we will not let slip out of our hands. We will fight it, we will pursue it, we will talk about it, and we will see that justice is given to not only Edwin Coelho, but anybody who's wrongly accused or wrongly a victim of police brutality.
Moving on to our second headline of the week. On 1st December, there are serious allegations made against a minister in the BJP cabinet by the Congress party about his involvement in a sex scandal. And this is by misusing his position as a minister, threatening the woman and having continuous assault on her, sexual assault on her. This was absolutely shocking, and the appeal was made to the chief minister to ask the minister to resign or to sack him.
You see, the thing is, as far as this particular press conference is concerned, where the Congress alleges a particular minister, cabinet minister, of inappropriate sexual behavior, there are two ways to look at it. One is, if it is a issue of a personal misconduct, okay, and if a woman has been wronged, and if it has been done while the cabinet minister has been in office, this is very, very serious.
Yeah.
If it's an absolutely personal issue with no complaints and there's nobody in the forefront, and if it is just salacious gossip, then I think one should leave it like right there. At that. And not get into it anymore, because that's completely personal. However, what it seems like from the allegations is that is not so in this case. It appears that the minister used his position and power to commit an act of sexual violence, and he was obviously a perpetrator of a alleged dastardly crime, if that is true. If there is enough evidence of this, then there should be obviously a very serious inquiry. You just can't say inquiry and leave it. There has to be a criminal investigation into this. If there is a complaint, the complaint has to be acted upon. If there is a FIR, it has to be filed. All this process of law should take place. While the Congress and others are saying the minister should be sacked immediately, for sure, but let the basic investigation happen very, very swiftly, so that you reach a conclusion that prima facie there is evidence to proceed against a particular minister. At that particular point of time, the minister should be sacked. What happens is, in most civilized countries, people in public offices hold themselves up to slightly higher standards. Okay. See, for instance, I'll give you two examples. One, a political example, and the other, a cricketing non-political example. I'll start with the cricketing one. Tim Paine, the captain of Australia, had had sexted a woman in Tasmania who was part of the Tasmanian Cricket Administration, because Tim Paine is from Tasmania, and he had had certain conversations with her, which was absolutely inappropriate, and and this showed up in some context. These texts showed up many years later. When they showed up and when it became public, Tim Paine quit as captain of Australia, and he's taken a break from cricket completely. So obviously he held himself up to a higher moral investigation. Let's leave that aside. I'll give you another example. Andrew Cuomo, who was the governor of New York, his brother is a very senior anchor in the CNN. Facts have come to light that when Andrew Cuomo was allegedly involved in, again, a huge scandal, sexual scandal, his brother, in his capacity as a senior anchor, may have had certain conversations, or may have at some point of time influenced the investigation which was going on against him, broadly speaking.
Yeah.
CNN immediately stepped in and suspended the anchor while investigations are going on. And they looked into every word that he's spoken on air, every move that he's made, to try and see if these charges are true, whether he has said anything on air which would benefit his brother during his trial or during the investigation process. So these are standards that they hold them up.
So basically you are saying that the political class does not hold itself to such high standards.
Yes.
And very often we have seen, even when there are very serious allegations, whether they are relating to sex or even to corruption,
Yes.
the politicians do not leave their chair unless they are kicked out.
Which is true, and they're hardly ever kicked out, because what happens is there are so many secrets shared amongst this whole club that nobody really wants to take any action against it, especially during election year. In election year, you don't mess with people if you know that it's going to come back and hit you at some point.
On Thursday, December 2nd, we have a headline in the Herald again about this variant of COVID, which is called as Omicron, which has cast its shadow on tourism in Goa. Now, this is hanging like a Damocles sword. Just when Goa tourism or tourism in India is beginning to recover, you have this severe jolt, and again tourism is on a very uncertain path.
Yes, there are two things. One is, of course, opinion is divided whether Omicron is serious or not serious, whether the vaccines that many of us have taken, whether it's going to work or not, whether Omicron is vaccine proof or not, what really is going to be the impact of it vis-a-vis the protective shield that people already have or not. And of course, some people are saying that this is yet another bogey to boost up the shares of the vaccine market. These are all discussions in the end, and we all know that this is all in the debate. Practically speaking, I think all we can know and all we can say is, look, protect yourself. And that's very important, in the sense that irrespective of whether there was Omicron or there was no Omicron, you need to wear those masks, you need to maintain the social distancing, you need to keep yourself clean, and this is not being done neither by the public, nor by public servants, nor by politicians. So there are two things. Recently there was a big festival, it's called the Chhath festival, where people really congregate. Essentially it's a festival of Bihar and Jharkhand. And people from those states living here, there were thousands and thousands, could be lakhs also, in Baina and in Miramar. No masks were worn. Every possible day on the beaches, even locals and others are throwing all caution to the winds. That is not correct. So if that goes on happening, you're running yourself a risk anyway. And where is the guarantee that even the earlier variant is not gone?
But do you think that this Government of India mandatory RT-PCR tests and isolation, do you think this is a thorn in the side?
It will certainly impact The government, as always, reacts in a knee-jerk manner. But I would say, look, there are no easy answers to this. Let's put it this way. I would say, yes, you cannot be so arbitrary so that just put a huge block. And because what's going to happen is, when people are double vaccinated, you shouldn't have to do the RT-PCR test. But when you're doing the RT-PCR test, you're also casting doubts amongst people as to how safe they actually are, whether they have the required antibodies or not. So I would say, like, it's easy to blame governments, and I feel that the government should be a little more pragmatic to do the balance between health and economy in a slightly better way. What sometimes happens is the government sometimes doesn't do this balance properly. They either swing completely to one side or they swing completely to the other. Either they shut down economy completely and cause a lot of suffering to people, or what they do is they do the exact opposite, throw all caution to the winds and open everything so that the risk is off. So I think a midway path has to be adopted. As far as Omicron is concerned, yes, I feel the Maharashtra government acted a tad differently from the rest of the country's guidelines, so they are revisiting that currently. Yeah. As far as Goa tourism is concerned, yes, Goa tourism has to open, tourists have to come in. Goa cannot suffer another year of this, but with one caveat: you should be given this privilege of keeping your businesses open, but this privilege comes with a rider that you have to do your bit and ensure that there is
the precautions.
You have to take the precautions and be safe, because you can't do a deal with this. The only deal that you can do is, you can't do a deal with your life and safety. But if you want your economy to run, businesses with run, then you ensure that they are done with precautions.
On December 3rd, we had this news about a lot of people coming out strongly in support of the Old Goa protest against this illegal structure which has been put up by a BJP functionary. Now this today, that is Saturday, the 4th of December, we enter the 11th day. You have been on the site, and you have also in your program,
people, yes,
point counterpoint, you have put a lot of people in the limelight, and you have taken their opinions about this protest. Now, although there was midweek, there was a revocation of this order, and later on, the TCP has sent a notice to the Panchayat saying that you issue a demolition order. Is it too early to celebrate? Because the people who are protesting are also very cautious.
Freddy, there is nothing to celebrate. I'll be very blunt about it. Of course, we know the larger issue of heritage preservation, what has happened with this particular structure. It's all over. I'd like to take a slightly different point, just to educate the viewers a little bit. In any project like this, in a heritage area or otherwise, there are two things. One is called a technical clearance and one is called a construction license. What happens is that technical clearance is given by the town and country planning, which that clearance basically means that you are technically equipped. Specifically, the specifications, okay. So you can carry on from the technical point of view, subject to the various provisions given in the technical clearance. Okay. Yeah. That is not a construction license. The Panchayat issues the construction license. Construction license issued by the Panchayat. And the technical clearance is given by the Town and Country Planning Department. Yeah. Over a period of time, what has happened is, the Panchayat has made the technical clearance and the construction clearance as a part of one homogeneous process. They are two different things. So the construction license is given. If the technical license is revoked, that does not necessarily mean that the construction license is also revoked. Okay? Yeah. The building has already come up. My point is, once the building has come up, you cannot revoke the construction license because it's already been constructed. Yeah. You are revoking a technical clearance when the building is almost up. You just need to put cement and finish the work, or whatever the status. But if you see visibly, it's come up. Okay? The house has come up. So what does it mean? Revoking the technical license means nothing. It doesn't mean that you have to demolish. You can only demolish when the construction license is declared null and void, not revoked, null and void, which means that the building which has been constructed is illegal. So that it's a very clear document that has to be given, followed by a demolition order, or the both can be in the same document. The construction license is revoked, and hereby the building has to be demolished. One follows the other.
Yeah.
One is the cause, the other is the action. Okay. So none of that has happened. The chief minister, obviously under pressure, both political pressure and public pressure, with people going on fasts and so on and so forth, and he said that instructions have been issued to the town and country planning to look, study and demolish. The town and country planning letter, which was served to the Panchayat of
Old Goa.
Old Goa yesterday, it was dated 2nd, sorry, the town and country planning letter, in the second last paragraph, essentially says that the technical clearance has been withdrawn and the Panchayat may take any action thereafter. There is no mention of demolition. Now the Panchayat can interpret this in any particular way. Any action thereafter, there is no time bound. It does not say that it has to decide and take specific action by such and such date. There is no time limit. There is no specification or even guidance as to what the action can be. They've just left it there. So now what the Panchayat can do is, Panchayat can turn around and say, yes, we are in receipt of this letter, we are studying the matter.
Yeah.
You can go on studying this matter till the end of February, till the elections are over. That's all they need to do. You must also understand that within a week from now, most Goans will be busy with Christmas activities.
Yeah.
The festive season will start.
Yeah.
There are so many weddings. The issue, they are just planning to sit out this period for a brief while, wait for it, and then immediately after that the code of conduct comes in by end January or mid-January, and everybody goes into election mode. They are only buying time for the next 30 days maximum. So the idea is that, which is why the protesters have very smartly and very rightly said that this is nothing but a hoax, and demolition orders have to be issued right now. Otherwise, all that is happening right now to ostensibly listen to the voice of the people is actually very clever whitewash.
On December 4th, we have this huge headline that the Archbishop has pledged solidarity with the protesters. And he has come out very strongly against the powers that be by saying that these are obnoxious activities, and if these are permitted in a heritage site, we stand in danger of losing the heritage tag which is attached to these World Heritage Monuments.
No, I feel all Goans from across all faiths should be grateful and thankful to the Reverend Archbishop for these words, because it also, I think these words also are indicative of the larger pain that the church feels in this.
Yeah.
But however, let me quickly point out that it is a pain of all of Goa. The church feels it because they are right in the middle, or they are involved in managerial and other capacities of all the ASI protected monuments. I mean, there is a linkage.
And there is also a history.
There's
because
also a history.
This is not the first illegal. There is
Absolutely,
another
correct.
one which is sitting next to the basilica.
Absolutely, correct. So these monstrosities come up. So there's a history of it, both from the point of view of heritage and from the point of view of faith. These are very solemn and serious issues. But I would reiterate that the Archbishop has felt the pain of all Goans across faiths. Because if you see the location where it is happening, and the fact that this is happening right, or almost adjacent or next to the most protected monuments of India, there, the Sa Cathedral, the Basilica, the Kajitan Church, all these places, and it hurts everybody because this particular heritage precinct does not belong to any one faith. And if you see people from all walks of life and across faiths have joined this movement,
yeah.
They've really converged with their hearts and souls, they've just moved there, they're sitting in dharnas, and and they're not eating anything, surviving only on drops of water. So what he said is, and for the Archbishop to use the word obnoxious would mean or signifies the depth of his frustration and hurt. Not just for himself or the church or the clergy, but for every Goan across all faiths.
Okay, I'm afraid we have completely run out of time. We have to end it here. So this was a review of all the stories that have, the major stories that have cropped up in our newspaper, The Herald, The Voice of Goa, from 28th of November to 4th December. We hope that you'll be back with us for another episode of The Week That Was. Till then, see you. Thank you.